I could recognize value maybe a little bit better than some of the other people that
Sure.
were out there. So it was easier to see one that was undervalued, grab it, do whatever you needed to do, bring it up to value, and then sell it, and then roll that money.
This is one of many interviews we did with Bill Winke for the Exodus and Land podcast this past March. And this video talks about how deer can impact real estate prices. And also, could Bill do it again? Could he go back and build a dream farm today, in today's time, with today's prices? The answer might surprise you. Hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. If you do, hit the like button and subscribe. Let's get right into it. Here we go.
The interesting thing about Iowa is obviously the deer drove up. Would you say that drove up the market the most? Was just deer?
Yeah.
So is there a different part of the country that maybe isn't as commercialized or as noticed right now that could see a similar run? Because, I mean, quite frankly, to me, it's a little bit scary that deer are what could be the factor or the multiplier for that area. And if the deer herd goes down, then in theory, the market would go down. So, like, what about North Dakota pocket or South Dakota pocket where it's relatively unnknown? And if you had a group to go in.
Yeah, I think you can find those still in some of those, Great Plains states.
Sure.
I think that's more of a hidden gem, so to speak. Maybe even Kentucky. You talked, Oklahoma when you guys first got here about some of the things you've seen there. Maybe Oklahoma's got some really good pockets too. I would say that Iowa is overbought from that standpoint, because everybody thinks that they need to come here. It's because everybody's, talks about it, and myself included. But there's a lot of other areas that you can have really good hunting. I mean, I think if you found the right neighborhood in almost any state, you could
be all right.
Well.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we've seen in our travels too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it sounds a little discouraging, like to jump to be, someone that's listening to this 2025 to do the same, string of events.
You have to start so much smaller.
Sure.
And it takes so much
longer to compound.
Yeah. Because, let's say I could, and we didn't really get into the way that I accumulated the properties, because I didn't just use my income and buy them. What I was also doing was looking for that diamond in the rough that was
the
outside.
Island, the 240 that we read about.
And then, go ahead.
And were you a partner with Larry Kendall in those two?
Not in those two. They were owned by me. But we had a number of other ones that we used Larry's money and my experience. But Larry, he picked it up really quick. He didn't really need me. I don't think at first he probably thought he did. But, as we went along, he's like, dang, why is Winke in on this? But so, the way we set that up was I would find the properties and I would make the decisions for management and so forth. And we'd use Larry's money. And then, we would split the profit on the back end. I didn't own any part of it. So any income that I got from that would have been just, ordinary income because there wouldn't have been any capital gains since I wasn't on the deed.
Yeah.
So it was more of like, a expensive consultant, to help him. And we did some nice properties. I mean, we bought a lot of stuff. And Larry did okay on it. And I did, pretty well too. I mean, we both did pretty well, but not near as well as if you find those really unique properties that are super undervalued, and then you bring them up to value, and then you own that whole thing, and then you sell it and do the 1031 exchange and move on. So that's where, but there's so few, those cherries, and you cast a wide net, and maybe for every, we had kind of a number that we figured is like for every 40 or 50 properties that we considered, we might look at, one or two, and we would make offers on every single one, and we didn't always get accepted, because you'd make an offer that made sense to you. And so that was, and maybe I'm wandering here where we're leaving the listener behind on some of this because I can see where, that it might become confusing. But so there was a couple things going on at the same time. I was doing, the writing, the photography. This was before Midwest Whitetail. So then Larry and I were using his money to buy recreational land and with the intent of reselling it. And then I was also using my own money to buy some with the intent of reselling. And some of that stuff that I owned, I mean, those two properties in particular were really cool properties, I mean, I really liked them, but it was an unsophisticated market, like we talked about. And if you could see that they were undervalued, then you were, one step ahead of the, most of the other buyers on the market. And, just from the experience that I had with hunting and the little bit of time I'd spent, on these properties dating back to 95, I could recognize value maybe a little bit better than some of the other people that
Sure.
were out there. So it was easier to see one that was undervalued, grab it, do whatever you needed to do, bring it up to value, and then sell it, and then roll that money. So So that's how I was getting, some of the money to come back into the stuff that I was buying closer to home.
Mm-hmm.
I never cashed out of any of that. Even the stuff with Larry, we found a way to work that back into land that I bought closer to home.
You talk about roughly, and this was even, I think, the interest rate that you had with Jack, 6% annual return or appreciation with recreational land. So obviously this past year or two, we've seen more than that. But if you flatten it out, you spread it out over a long time.
Yeah.
Let's say with an average of $4,500 an acre in today's market across the Midwest, in 20 years, that puts that value at $14,432 an acre. Is that realistic? Because when you say it out loud, it seems crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it is.
Yeah.
Because when we were buying it for $300 and something an acre, did 4,000 seem realistic? No. I mean, who would have thought it would ever get to 4,000, in 25, 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's realistic. I think that especially right now with this inflation, it's kind of scary because, people are dumping into the hard assets. They're dumping into land and they're dumping into, anything that's not paper.
Yep.
Because they're afraid that paper is not going to be worth anything. If inflation holds on, it's going to drive these prices, and maybe it goes to whatever, another year of 20+%, but then it has to flatten.
Sure.
It can't. It's not sustainable, in my opinion, to keep going up like that. Somewhere it's going to have to go down to nothing. Somewhere there has to be a collapse.
A stalemate for a while.
Yeah.